Hi guys, I'm Dr. Kimberly Olson, licensed clinical psychologist, licensed marriage and family therapist. I want to welcome you back to Relationship Rescue Part 3. If you've done Part 1 and Part 2, boy, you have done a lot of work, and it's today that you're really going to begin to have your aha moments, and those moments can really change your life. If you accidentally stumbled upon this video and want to go on a journey with us to really improve your relationships, it's a lot of work, but well worth it. And I hope that you would go back to the first video, Real Relationship Rescue Part 1, and join us on this journey. I wanted to show you one thing. I mean, you guys know that I'm not real sort of technologically hip at all. I had told you guys that I made, oh, shoot. Okay, so the board, I just wanted to show you the poster board piece that, in fact, when I've done it in workshops and with groups, we put it on an actual poster board because generally speaking, there's a heck of a lot of information that you want to include on there. I also want to really congratulate you on your dedication to working on your relationships. The patterns area was probably a little bit easier than the template area, but either way, you're demonstrating a real dedication to change, one that required some time and effort. So let's take a peek at what you got and talk about what we're going to do with this. Okay, kiddos, now we're on to the patterns worksheet. Same drill as last time. Okay. Your responses to these items will go under each of the categories. So for example, demographics, items 21 through 26 go into that category, 29, 30, and 53. Your responses regarding female authority figures, they come from the questionnaire, items 4, 5, 9, 10, 14, 15, 51, 52, 54, 55, 56, 57, and 58. All right, so you get the hint. Go ahead and pause the video and go ahead and do that and transfer, and it should probably take you 10 or 15 minutes. Transfer your information onto your chart, okay? Then we are going to go and see what this really looks like. Okay, so this comes from my book. Don't worry about it. You're getting this information for free from me. I own the copyright, so don't worry. What we're looking at now, after you've written down your patterns, okay, what things do the items you wrote in your pattern section have in common with your demographics? So in this person's case, they spent from age 12 onward in Walter, Nevada. And if you look in the pattern section, they stayed there. Okay? They grew up in a safe environment and they still live in a safe environment. They were raised in a middle class and they've advanced a little bit, which by the way is not uncommon, and gone to the upper middle class. They have a long-term marriage, much like their parents did. Okay, so you can see that this template has been played out again in this person's life over the years, right? Where do we get our values? Where do we get our idea of what's normal? Well, based on what we were raised with. Okay, female authority figures. So we talked about how mom yelled, cried, overate, was very demeaning, and it was really important for her to win. And when she was sad, she would overeat, cry, isolate. When mom was in a good mood, she was the neighborhood mom, creative, recovery, funny. Work, this mom got fired a lot. And the mom was very competitive. So dad's loyalty was loyal to mom even when she was wrong, and appearances were important. Well, we start looking at how this pattern has played out over this person's life, okay? So there's a connection here with some of the teachers. Loving felt special. Well, we see here that when mom was joyous, okay, she could be a neighborhood mom, creative and funny. Humiliation, closely related to being with somebody who's demeaning. Bosses, overall loving and fair, but occasionally competitive, undermining, feeling misjudged and helpless. So understand in this section, we're talking about your female bosses, okay? And how you interact with them. How do you feel when you realize that your boss is a female? Do you tend to feel competitive with them? Do you tend to listen to everything that they say? Do you tend to shy away from them? I mean, all of those things are very much connected to our original relationship with a female authority figure, which was your mom. Okay. And in work, this person's the hero, hardworking and dedicated, which you will see the connection when we get down to the dad. Okay, male authority figure. Dad was the anger. With his anger, he was the peacekeeper with mom, even at our expense. When he was sad, he would isolate, work more. When he was joyful, he was a listener, outdoors, gets along with everyone. Work, very dedicated, loved, but unclear whether or not he actually respected his spouse, and failure to protect. So when we start looking at how this has played out over this person's life, you can see how their relationship with their bosses, with male bosses, have been impacted. So they tend to be drawn to employers who are very kind and fair, but are very passive and don't advocate for them, which is a reenactment of what happened with this person's dad. Okay. The dad was lovely, sweet, right? But didn't stand up for her when the mother was being abusive. So we can see now how this plays out over again, that this person tends to invest a lot of time in relationships with male authority that are very kind and loving, but tend to drop them on their ass when they need something, when they need advocacy, when they need somebody to stand up for them. Okay. All right, what about peers? And of course, your earliest peers are your siblings. We talked about the brother being talented athlete, likable, popular. Extended family preferred them, poor academics, told their secrets, unsupportive, and victim postures. With friends in early childhood, exclusivity, one best friend, some betrayal. So when we see how this plays out over this person's life, they still have this exclusivity. Okay. So they tend to put all their energy into one friendship, right? As opposed to, that little cliche of putting all your eggs in one basket. They have a lot of acquaintances, okay, but really only one true friend. Positive shared experiences and connection with their peers. Okay, so they're able to share on a superficial level and get along well enough to survive and work and survive in general society. Negatives, they have had some betrayal and that their secrets have been told by friends, but they were few and far between. So what's really nice about this piece right here is that this person really practiced a balanced perspective, right? Because nobody is all one thing or all negative or all positive, right? So they're looking at both the good news and the bad news. So mostly positive in their interactions. So again, what's really in common here is that this person tends to maintain exclusivity. So if you only have one friend, okay, what happens if there's a problem with that friendship? What kind of vulnerability have you set yourself up for? Okay. Culture, how did culture transmit through the generations? Religion, again, they were Baptist, God was to be feared. In adulthood, spiritual, God is to be loved. So they've had maybe a corrective emotional experience and changed their perception. Ethnicity, Caucasian, French, and American, middle class. Their ethnicity, or what they would identify in adulthood, is Caucasian and American. So in adulthood, this person no longer included sort of their origins here. They are part of subculture, though. The LGBTQ, there's a member of their family that's in that community. And why does this matter? Because it absolutely impacts how you see the world. It impacts your relationships. It puts your thinking is going to be different than others who maybe were not part of that community. And the same is true if you were raised around gangs, if you were raised in the military. Just these subcultures have influence. So the expectations to get married and have children. So the stereotypes must have been given everything, not curvy or appealing. So here's the thing, what they believe about their culture, okay, and this is a Caucasian person, that other people perceive them as having, being born with a silver spoon in their mouth and given everything. And this person is not curvy and consequently does not feel like they're very sort of sexually or attractive and peel under the current culture. And of course, the current culture right now, what's really in is very curvy women. And so this person's not so curvy, and so that impacts their thinking. Racism, they taught kids about to be aware of white privilege. And again, as I said in the last video, it isn't so much that the older parents intentionally left it out, it's just they weren't aware. Okay, their romantic relationships. Their first was communicative, funny, unfaithful, addiction, lies, manipulations, and abuse. Okay, so when we look at romance here and relationships with mom, we can see the connection. Okay, the old cliche is you are one parent, you marry the other. You can begin to see a connection where this person needed to win, they were demeaning, they experienced humiliation. And when we look at their romance, that's what they had. The second, however, was loyal and kind, surface level communications, and they've experienced some loneliness. Both find meaning in their work. Okay. And this person has struggled with sort of failure to protect, much like in the relationship with dad. So the purpose of this at this point is to really start looking at the connections between what you saw growing up and how you continue to replay it. Okay. It's not an accident that you continue to get into the same types of relationships, because without intervention, okay, we're drawn to what we know and we're doomed to repeat history if we don't intervene. When they're with their children, they tend to be irritable and isolated when they're angry. Okay, so they tend to keep to themselves. When they're sad, crying, and isolated, that's what they do when they're sad. When their spouse is angry, the spouse becomes sarcastic. When the spouse is sad, void, meaning in this lady's case, her husband didn't have a great range of emotions. Okay, joy, spending time together, crafts, travel, special moments. Okay, so start looking at these connections. And again, why is this so relevant? Because this is sort of your first step in learning what moves you and what moves your spouse. Okay, the old cliche, apple don't fall far from the tree, is pretty accurate. Okay, it's not that we don't intervene, that we don't change things in our lives, because we absolutely do. Okay, but we don't tend to do that unless we're aware. So go through, underline, or highlight the similarities between your templates, okay, and your patterns. That's the assignment, and it should be a huge aha moment. Where we're going to go next week is to eliciting maneuvers. Eliciting maneuvers is a little bit different, because up to this point, we've been talking really about other people, right? And how other people have impacted your life, about pain that maybe other people have inflicted, or joy, right? So this eliciting maneuver portion is really about you and what you do to get people to behave in a predictable way. Okay. And it kind of separates the men from the boys, to be honest, because most people are pretty open to talking about their own pain, right? And things that have happened at the hands of others. But we shirk a little bit more when we start talking about our own culpability. Now, hear me out. I am not victim blaming, right? So if you've ended up in numerous abusive relationships, I am in no way suggesting it's your fault. What I am suggesting is that there's certain things that you're doing that predict becoming involved in an abusive relationship. So let me give you an example, okay? Don't lose your mind yet. I'm not victim blaming. When you are raised in a non-abusive environment, when someone is demeaning or unkind, you catch it right away. Okay, so let's say you went out on a date with some guy, and he started taking like sarcastic cheap shots at you at dinner. If you were raised in a healthy environment, chances are you would simply not go out with that person again, right? Because that person's an ass and you're not going to go out with them again. Well, what if you were raised by an ass? If you were raised by an ass, then that type of behavior is familiar to you. You may not even question it. Okay. Well, that's the way all men act, right? So you tolerate things by not recognizing them as red flags. Okay. So that's one thing that we do to elicit behavior from others. If you, excuse me, are a person who feels chronically alone, right? But you also don't go out. You also don't invest in friendships. You don't tell anybody but maybe one other person in your life what's going on with you. Of course, you feel alone. So your listening maneuver is what you do to get people to behave in a predictable way. So in this worksheet, we're going to look at things from the beginning. How did you prepare to support yourself, right? Because that's going to predict your future financially. What do my relationships with female authority figures and my relationships with my mother have in common? Okay. Go to your relational chart. You should be able to go back and look at the template and patterns and find these. What do my relationships with male authority figures and my relationship with mom have in common? Okay. So we're going to be looking at all types of behaviors, like what types of behavior are red flags, okay, that a relationship with a female authority figure is not safe. Describe how feeling threatened impacts your actions or attitudes. Well, what do you mean I don't feel threatened? If you're feeling defensive, you're feeling threatened. Okay. If you're having an adversarial reaction to somebody, there's a threat somewhere. So that's what I mean by that when I say feel threatened. Okay. Can you think of a time when your assumptions about a female authority figure were wrong? Okay. And if you can, you want to jot these down. The more honest you can be, the more you're going to get out of this. Okay. Because when we get to eliciting maneuvers, this is where we're really getting to the behavior we can change. Okay. Now we've come to understand it through the templates and the patterns. So when we start with eliciting maneuvers, it's what are we going to do about it now? Okay. So do me a favor and do your eliciting maneuvers worksheet. Then we will check back in again. Okay. And I will show you how it applies to the chart. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask them within the chat. That's fine. Comments, that's fine. And we will address eliciting maneuvers. Again, this is going to be the first time since we started this project that you're actually going to start seeing behavior that you're going to be able to do differently. That will be life-changing. All right. I will see you next week for the next video and next portion of our workshop. Take care.